We're seeing right now academic witch hunts and censorship and demonization of From the River to the Sea and Intifada. As promised, I did promise that we would watch Stefanik just for a little bit. Don't worry, guys. Trigger warning again. And Brad also had some hot headlines he wanted to show to introduce people to Stefanik, to show how well-rounded she is. She's not just a McCarthyite. Stefanik echoed racist theory allegedly espoused by Buffalo suspect. Then she tweeted out, the Soros-backed woke prosecutor Alvin Bragg must testify under oath before Congress. Yeah. So there she is. So this is the woman who's going to ensure my safety as a Jew.
Madam
let's
Chair,
see what
I'd
she
like
had to
to
say.
yield the balance
And
of my
here she
time
is
to the gentlewoman from New
interviewing.
York.
Here she is grilling the presidents of MIT, Harvard, and Penn.
Dr. Kornbluth, at MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
Worth noting that she's grilling a Jewish
woman, yeah.
Of MIT.
Sahar, you as an academic, how would you, not that you're not also very impressive analyst, Mitchell, I realize I sound like a real classist snob or something, but how would you have responded if you were in that position?
Well, I think the first response was correct, where she stated, I have not heard, or there seems to be no evidence that someone is saying what you've just said, that we seek a genocide of Jews. When she said intifada, I would have said the intifada does not mean that this is that calling for the genocide of Jews. And so first, intifada means the shaking off, right? The shaking off of oppression, the shaking off of suffering, the shaking off of not just, occupation, but being oppressed. And that can come in different forms. We've seen nonviolent civil disobedience. And it is every time, for example, a college student would just say revolution. Does that necessarily mean they're going to go and commit a mass shooting? Of course not. If a college student says let's revolt, that the interpretation is based on the context, and we've seen that the context here is exercising your free speech rights and your right to assembly, which is granted to you by the U.S. Constitution to engage in protests and sit-ins and teach-ins. And so the question is, why don't we see that as normal? Why do we see that? Why do we interpret that as threatening? And I also want to know that nobody seems to care at all about the feelings of Palestinians in America. In other words, Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims, and I think anybody who humanizes or has some form of human empathy towards Palestinians right now is extremely offended, uncomfortable, insulted when you have a protest that is adamantly supportive of Israel at this moment in time, because what Israel is doing is, in my opinion, genocidal, right? They're committing a lot of war crimes. Now, people have the right to do that, but if we're going to base the First Amendment and free speech rights, and especially at college campuses, based on how people feel, well, then any protest, any teaching, any event that is supportive of Israel should also be shut down, because I can guarantee you, I know, I've talked to students, they feel unsafe, they feel insulted, they feel hurt, and the administrators are not reaching out to them. The universities are not creating task forces to combat Islamophobia, to combat anti-Arab racism, to combat anti-Palestinian racism. The universities aren't even taking the time to meet with them, to check in with those students, which goes to show that these Muslim, Arab, South Asian students are second-class citizens, because effectively they're being treated like brown and black people have always been treated in the United States. And what I think many Jewish American students need to appreciate is especially those that are pro-Israeli, that are supportive of Israel right now at this moment in time, that they are experiencing the privileges of whiteness, and they are allowed to engage in white fragility to the extent that it violates their classmates' rights. because they don't feel like it's safe or they don't feel like it's comfortable. And that is very different than an anti-Semitic act where someone is physically assaulted, verbally abused, where it's something that's individualized. That is absolutely anti-Semitism. But that's not what is being pointed to as the example by the American Defamation League, by the Zionist Organization America, by the Brandeis Law Center, by all of these Zionist groups who have made it very clear that all they want is no debate, no discussion, censorship. I can't think of anything more anti-American than that, frankly.
Yeah.
Intifada, in fact, is not centered around the Jewish actions. It's centered around Palestinians feeling and experiencing repression and resisting it in the context of the universities. The resistance is through protests, through chants, through teach-ins, through sit-ins. These are all very American. So I think it's clear what she's doing is she is redefining a word. She's saying that blue means red. No, blue does not mean red. Blue means blue. And it's clear that this is all in bad faith. But I do want to say something about the white nationalists. Who slaughtered the congregants in the Tree of Life synagogue? A white nationalist. Who went to Charlottesville and had a mass protest and said Jews will not replace us? White nationalists, right? Who is going around threatening synagogues and engaging in assault or violence against Jews in America, which is legitimate anti-Semitism? It's white nationalists. And this focus on a political dispute takes attention away from the real threat to Jews. And so I think that's another way that the community is being harmed. And I think that when people who are in genuinely interested in anti-Semitism are allying with congressional leaders whose affiliations with white nationalists are known, I can't.
Maybe
I think
they're
that
not
is
genuinely
deeply
interested in.
unethical.
Right. And maybe they're not, you said people who are genuinely interested in anti-Semitism. Right. Maybe they're not genuinely interested in anti-Semitism.
I would also suggest they're not genuinely interested in law and order. The way we have responded since October 7th has been in terms of the campuses and the protests and all of this stuff, which I also think and not. We should point out that it's distracting a lot of Americans,
of course,
from what's actually happening in Gaza. So, and that's happening in both directions,
and it's intentional.
I don't think that's an accident at all. But also, to the extent that it's a legitimate discussion, we're focusing on the discomfort of Jewish students. Well, what about the Palestinian American students who were shot in Burlington?
Right.
What about the Palestinian American, I believe, at least Arab American student who was run over at Stanford? What about the little Palestinian American boy who was killed by his landlord, and his mother stabbed, and gravely injured?
Right. Where are the hearings on that? On Palestinian safety?
Not that I want to see anybody, this shouldn't happen to anyone. And I do understand, that there is actual rising anti-Semitism that we're entirely ignoring in the name of protecting Israel. But to make the case that we have to focus on the feelings of Jewish students on campus, but that, okay, we put the three Palestinian American students who were shot, we put them in the headlines for a day, and then we moved on. Same with the little boy.
And there's no governmental response to this. There's no
university response.
Yeah, universal response.
Right.
Yeah.
And minimal media response. There's been, it hits the headlines one day, there's no follow-up.